So let's talk about the kinds of beliefs that are most likely to lead to potential disrespect. The first one is stereotypes, and you've all heard of stereotypes. Stereotypes are simply standardized mental models or qualities that we assign to a particular group. We know that they're oversimplified and generalized. So for example, ladies, do you have stereotypes about men? Of course you do. What are they? We're pretty tough. So what are some of the stereotypes that women have about men? Don't like to ask for what? Directions. What else? We're horrible listeners. We're selective. We only listen selectively to what we want to hear, right? We're generally not nearly as clean as our female counterparts. What else don't we do? Anything? Share emotions. Very good. Now, men, do we have stereotypes about women? Not when Shelley's here, no way. Absolutely we do. We know better than to articulate them, but we do. The thing is, it's like we were talking about last night. Do you want to be right or do you want to be happy? Right? And so what happens is this. Stereotypes, I could say any group. I could say people who were in the band in high school. Could we assign a kind of a group of attributes to people who were in the band in high school? Of course, they wouldn't be very accurate and certainly wouldn't encompass everybody, but we can do that. And the reason that we have stereotypes in the first place is because absent any other firsthand information about a person, that's really all we have to go on, right? Now, the thing about stereotypes is we don't typically assign a lot of emotion to them. If somebody behaves in a way that's not consistent with the stereotype for their group, whatever that is, we don't get all upset about that. It's because it's like we know it's loose anyways. But here's what we do have a stronger connection to. It's something called bias. And a bias is a little bit different because a bias is actually a value judgment. It's basically a tendency to believe that some people, some ideas, etc., are actually better than others. Even when we think them, sometimes we know better than to speak them. Okay? A bias can be developed either from my firsthand experiences with people or groups of people, or it can be inherited and passed down. They're held by all people. This is what's so important. They're held by all people at both the conscious and unconscious level. Some of our biases we know we have preferences for. But most of them are unconscious, meaning that they actually affect our behaviors without even knowing that they're affecting our behaviors. Every single person in this room, including me, has biases. And so what I want, part of this message is, having biases doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you a human being. That is, if we didn't have biases, and I'll explain why in a second, we would never make it past 9 o'clock in the day most mornings. Because there's simply too much information to take in. Biases typically are oriented around a preference that we have for things that we associate with ourselves. So we are the prime candidate. If you're like me, you're good, and that's a good thing. Or if you represent a group that I aspire to be a part of myself, that's what we typically show favoritism and a preference for. So there are two types of biases that we will typically develop preferences around. One is things that we see instantaneously about a person: their weight, their height, their build, their gender, skin tone, age. Do you know that we have, as a general rule, a bias towards symmetry? Has anybody ever heard that? We have a bias towards people who are shaped symmetrically. Does anybody know why that is? It signals health and a healthy potential partner for breeding with for the next generation. And so we all, even though our version of symmetry may differ from culture to culture, we all tend to like people who are shaped evenly, and we will give them more preference in some areas. Then there's things that we have to learn about a person before we know whether we like them or not. As revealed, their education, what they're educated in, how they're educated, their religion, sexual orientation, all those kinds of things. The worst thing that we could ever do is to walk out of here saying, nope, I don't have biases, because every single one of us does. And the reason we have biases is because, and stereotypes for that matter, is because our brain is extremely limited. So one of the reasons that we fall back on stereotypes and biases is because they represent shortcuts in thinking. They allow me to take a few desperate points of information, make conclusions about those, and move forward very, very quickly. So stereotypes and biases actually allow us to get through. Sometimes, however, that can actually include treating Michael or anybody else in ways that are inappropriate or as they perceive to be disrespectful. In all cases, what they lead to is what we call prejudgments. The same root word as prejudice, but a prejudgment is simply when we make decisions or take actions without all of the information that's available.